So in the last video, we created a end-to-end solution where we were able, through a service portal, to create a new user. And if you remember, in the original setup, what we did is we passed through from the service manager 3 parameters related to creating this new Active Directory user. Now the problem with this is it's very limited. While we're only passing through a couple of parameters, it's not too much of a problem. But if we wanted to pass through, say, a list of groups that we want to add this person to, well, how will we be able to create a list of groups here? Would we have to create an item for every single group and give it a yes, no? What happens if we want to have information like who created the service request, who's the manager going to be, so we want to get the Active Directory object of who the manager is, and all information like this. And to take this forward, we need to think of it in a different way. So at the moment, the way it worked was Service Manager, when we created a new service request, through the runbook activity, it pushed through the parameters that were in this initialized data. What we can do is think about this slightly differently. With Orchestrator, it has full access to Service Manager, and within these integration packs, we can actually get access to the whole service request, all the information that was in the service request, who created it, the time it was created, any configuration items that have been associated to it. So what we actually want to do is, instead of sending through all this information, we just want to send through the ID of the service request that has been created, and then tell Orchestrator to go and recover or go and pick up that service request from Service Manager and make it available within Orchestrator. And what we'll be able to do is use all the information that is stored in the service request within the rest of our Orchestrator designer. And as we start to get more advanced and want to do lots of additional things with our users and send emails to people, so we'll need email addresses and all this kind of stuff, it's going to make life so much easier. Now when we go through this, it's going to seem a bit strange because it's almost going to feel like a step backwards. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by using the standard service request template. Now within the standard service request template, there are not many fields that we can put data into to be passed into Orchestrator. So what we're going to do is start off by bringing in the service request into Orchestrator. So what we can do is we're going to remove all of these. Okay, and what we can do is we're simply going to pass in the ID of the service request. Now the ID will be a GUID, and the fact that it's GUID means that it needs to be a string. And then what we can do is we're going to detach from here and attach to our object. We're going to rename this service request. And we're going to select our connection to Service Manager. And we're going to say what class this is. For the moment, it's just going to be a service request. Okay, and what we can do is, how do we find this? So what we need to do is we need to go off to the database in Service Manager, or go to the software development kit and pull down all the information related to this class and from the GUID. And the GUID for service requests is known as SC Object GUID. And we bring the value in again from the run bus that we talked about before, by selecting initialize data and selecting ID. And that's going to bring in the initialization. So this is going to bring, this object is going to represent the service request that has been created. Now what we need to do is, before we pass the initialization data, the username, first name and surname, into the create user. At the moment, I haven't really got anywhere within the service request where I can store the first name, second name and surname. So just for the moment, I'm going to use the fields within a service request. Let's create a new service request. We're going to look at extending the service request template to give us as many fields and properties as we need. But just for the moment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the title here as the area where we're going to put the AD username. And I'm going to use the description field for the first name, and I'm just going to delete the surname for the moment. So the way we do that is bring this across to the create user. So I'm going to come into the create user object, and I'm going to delete all these parameters that were coming through from the initialize object, because it's no longer going to work. When we initialize the object, there's going to be no parameters passed through. And just for the moment, I'm going to remove last name just to prove the concept. And what we're going to do is from common name, we're going to pick this up, and you'll see now that we actually initialized data doesn't have the information, but now we have access to all the parameters under the service request. So just for the moment, we're going to say use description for the user account, and first name we're going to use title. So just to recap, when we go back to service desk, when we create a new service request in the portal, all we're going to do is pass over the ID of that service request to Orchestrator. Orchestrator is then going to use that ID to go back to Service Manager to pick up the service request that has all the information in it and pass that through to the create user. When we create the portal screen in Service Manager in a minute, what we're going to do is we're going to map the username and the first name to the description and title fields within the service request. What I'm also going to do as this starts to become more and more complex, we might need to end up debugging certain issues. So we're going to turn on some debugging options by going to properties on selecting the create user, going to logging and asking it to store the specific information that's been sent through so that we can look at this if there's any problems. And I'm going to check this back in. So I'm going to come back into Service Manager and I'm going to go to Orchestrator and I'm going to synchronize now. And we go back to our runbook and refresh, and we can see it's now become invalid. Now the reason it's become invalid is because we've now changed the parameters that have been passed into it. Before we were passing in username, first name, surname. Now Orchestrator is only expecting one ID. Because there's a mismatch, this has become invalid. So we're going to delete this and we're going to go back to our administrator. We can go Orchestrator and synchronize. We are going to go back to our runbooks and then we're going to create an automation template from here. So we can call it runbook, create new AD user, and we're going to tick ready for automation. And we look at our runbook tab, we can see here that there is an ID field. At the moment it is mapped to text1. We're just going to leave that for the moment. We're going to come back to the template that we created earlier. So service request, create new AD user. And we're just going to delete this runbook from here and we're going to re-add it. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to come down to the runbook and in the ID field here we're going to edit the mapping and we're going to click service request and we're going to pass in the object ID. And although it shows nothing in there, if we just scroll across here we can see that we're going to map the property ID to the root work item and we're going to apply this and then we're going to save our new template. Right, so that's created. We're going to have to create a new service request offering. So we are going to quickly run through this exactly the same as we did before. So we're going to create a new request offering. Okay, create new AD user. Select the template, same template as before. User prompts. Now we're only going to do the username and first name for the moment. Right, we're going to map these, as we said before, to title. It's going to be username and description is going to be first name. And we're going to publish this. And close. And what we can do now is go down to our service offering, the request offering here. So we're going to come back to our portal We're going to create a new AD user, and we're going to call this test 00000, and we're going to call this James. We'll call it Sillett, and we hit submit. Okay, and that's been submitted. So we come over, we can look at the service request that's been created. And as you can see, we have the title is the username, and the description is the last name, or sorry, the first name. So if we now come over to Orchestrator, okay, well, we come over to here, we can kind of see this as if this has worked or not. If we have a look, we can see that there's a warning that's come through, so it hasn't worked. Okay, and we can see that the user created has failed. What we can see is if we go to the service desk, we can, or service request, we can actually see, if we come down here, say to description maybe. Okay, we can see Sillett's come through there, and title, which will be the account, is 00, so that's fine. So let's have a look why this failed. Okay, so this is a user Sillett already exists. Now, this implies to me that I might have got the mappings a bit wrong, because that was supposed to be the surname. So if we go and have a quick look at this, which we'll check it out, we can see, okay, I've got these around the wrong way from what I thought, so we can change this to title. And change this to description. Title. Okay, this almost certainly worked. Now this is a good opportunity to show how we can use the debugger. If we come to the initialized data, so if we look at this log here and come to the initialized data and select ID, we can see this is the ID of the service request that's been put through. If we take a copy of this, what we can do is we can go into the runbook tester and we can test this. So what we can do is if we click initialize data, it is looking for the parameters to test. So we hit run and paste in that GUID and hit go. We can see it actually showed the running through. And this time we can see it's successful, probably because we've got it around the right way. Distinguished name is test 000. And if we come over to our DC, we can see test 00 has been created. Clearly there's massive limitations because we've had to use the title and description for passing information in. What we're going to do in the next video is we're actually going to extend the service request class and allow us to create all the different fields that we need for our project. And this means that we're going to be able to pass all that information into the service request. So all that information is in the service request. And then we're going to be able to do is pass that service request into Orchestrator, and we'll have huge amounts of power to do different things. And as we build up the complexity of this, we will be able to take advantages of lots of the functionality from the authoring tool. So everyone, thank you for watching. Cheers.